intelligent.
Hang on a second. So I have a very distinguished person with me today, Dr. Frank, and I'll give an introduction. Amazing person with more than 35 years in the industry, PhD holder, a sports person in the back, whatnot. He has done so many things. I think I would take more than an hour to describe his personality and his accomplishments. Without taking much time, I just wanted to jump onto our main conversation. And you know what my first question is? How did that happen from street hustler to a strategic hustler? So how, and that word itself is so catchy for me. And I went over and over and I had to read your entire biography and the foreword and you know what others are talking about to get to that position. But I would love to hear from you, Dr. Frank.
Sure. Great. Thank you for for having me. A street hustler. I'll skip over the etymology of the word hustler and just go right into a more practical application. Okay. This type of, it's a leader. Okay, first of all, it's a leader that follows an intelligent, tenacious leadership style. Okay, and that's needed today in the 21st century to transform a stagnant business model into an agile business model to enable, let's say, blue ocean digital business creation, survival, and growth in the 21st century and beyond. We live in a globalized world, and another way that you can call a globalized world is a VUCA world, a world that's full of change, it's volatile. And with that change, there's a lot of uncertainty. And with uncertainty, you're moving into uncharted waters, so it becomes more complex. And in addition to that, moving into uncharted waters, it becomes ambiguous. Okay. And so the strategic hustler, first of all, has a spiritual connection, okay, with a disciplined vision. Okay. And I choose my words very carefully. I say spiritual because I work with professionals and executives from all over the world. Okay. And one thing that we can all agree on, that they all have some type of spiritual connection. Okay, that gives them and drives them, gives them a disciplined vision. And with that disciplined vision, it allows them to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Okay, because it equips them to embrace the ebbs and flows of what I call change. Now, change, I'm using this as a mnemonic and a title acronym to me, creating a healthy and new growth to becoming extraordinary. And see, I use the word extraordinary because nowadays we live in what I call a creation economy. And to excel in the creation economy, it's not good enough to be good or to be excellent. Because when you're good and excellent, the only thing that you're going to become is irrelevant. Okay? You have to be extraordinary. You have to be extraordinary. Okay? And so that's what change represents. And that change fuels what I call another mnemonic and title acronym called JUICE. And so JUICE, the J stands for you have a joyful personality. Okay, you have joyful personality. You work with people all around the world. You've got to be able to you've got to be able to smile when it's good and when it's bad. Okay, you're the leader, and so you have to be that calm in the center of the storm.
True.
Okay, the U focuses on having unique and valued competencies and capabilities. Okay, the I stands for integrity, and integrity beyond reproach. Now, let me talk a little bit about integrity, because when you look at your leaders, everyone wants their leaders to have integrity, someone that is ethical, and someone that lives a life of character. Okay, but from my viewpoint, integrity is more than being ethical. Okay, it's more than being inspirational. A person with integrity has the rare ability to pull things together, pull all things together and make things happen no matter how challenging the circumstances. So you see, that has nothing to do with character. That has nothing to do with being ethical. Okay. I'm quite sure you've probably met, just like I've met, as you travel around the world, you meet men and women, they were all of integrity. They were all good people. Okay. But there was something about them that either they were successful or they were missing something. Now, I know that sounds a little confusing, but let's talk about those that were missing something. Okay. And there's something about their personhood, okay, that kept them from investing in things that if they would have invested, they would have been achieving the things that based upon the investments that they already made in themselves. Okay, so as adults, we say, okay, we look at our character and we'll say, okay, yeah, I'm lacking in there. I'm lacking here. So I'll invest in that. This one, no, I won't invest in. Okay, and so what happens is this: they never get past what I call the PO in potential. Okay, they never get past the PO in potential. And what clinical psychologists have said, what happens is, people that, and you'll read that in my book as I start talking about, they're unsuccessful at getting people to follow them. Okay, you can't they don't win their hearts and their minds and their following. Okay, another thing is that they miss blind spots. Okay, and so when you're missing your blind spots, you fall short in terms of your company, your products, your services, your people. There's just a litany of things that you just overlook. You fall short in terms of achieving your goals, your objectives. You can't deal with difficult people. And so when you start looking at how an organization, the things that an organization has to go through in order to transform, okay, it's very important that you have someone, ethical is nice, okay, living a life of character is nice, but the bottom line is what as one of my mentors would call it, is getting shiitake done. Okay, getting shiitake done. So that's what the I focuses on. Okay, the C in juice focuses on a commitment to becoming extraordinary. Okay. You have to be committed to becoming extraordinary. And the last one, E, I call it E because it's really the most powerful, because as a leader, you have to be able to empower with emotional energy and edge. You have to be able to empower others with emotional energy and edge. So that's the juice portion of it. Okay. And so now I'm going to introduce you to another mnemonic and title acronym called PRIDE. Okay. And so with PRIDE, we're talking about P, you have passion for what you're doing. The R is respect for people and the process. One of the world-class leadership behaviors that I teach is respect, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Because living in a globalized world, you're going to have to work with people that don't look like you, that don't think like you, that don't talk like you, and so, and on and on and on and on. And so if you can't get past that, then, it's going to be very difficult for you to achieve anything as a leader within your organization. Okay. The I focuses on intelligence. And really, you have a question in that talks about mindset. I'm going to introduce you to something right now called what I call the intelligent mindset, because that's what leadership really is. It's the intelligent mindset. And the way that I like to explain the intelligent mindset is that I like to talk about what I call the 6 I's to being intelligent. Okay, so the first I is innovation. Speaks to itself. Okay. The second I is having insight. Okay. The third I is being able to take the initiative. Okay. No matter what it takes, okay, being able to have that courage to take the initiative. Okay. The fourth I is to be able to influence. One of the things that I learned over my 30 plus years in the industry is that I influence directly and indirectly. So for example, let's take you, for example. I may never lead you in any type of initiative, but the words that that are coming out of my mouth, the things that you're going to read in my book are going to directly impact you in some way that you're going to do something different within your organization. Okay, so what does that mean? That means I have an indirect influence on what you do in your organization. Okay, so you have to understand as a leader, that you don't have to be the leader to be a leader. Okay, the next one is okay, we talked about influence, interpersonal skills. And so now we're talking about emotional intelligence, being aware of yourself, and then understanding how what you say, what you do, the impact that it has on the social environment. And that's closely tied to respecting diversity. And then the last part, again, as I mentioned, is integrity. And a person with integrity, there are 6 traits that a person with integrity has. Okay, first of all, that first trait is being trustful, building trust. And they understand that to build trust is that you have to make a connection. Then you have to communicate. Then you have to cooperate, come to some type of agreement. And if you don't do those things, it's going to be very difficult to accomplish the next 2 I's. That is coordinate and collaborate. So I call those the 5 C's to building trust. During some of my previous engagements, I was working with a major e-commerce company, and I was the process excellence director, and I was focused on the global technology security group. And so I was talking to a person in Omaha, Nebraska, and she had global responsibility, and she was talking about some of the problems that she had. And so one of the questions I asked her, I said, have you ever met the person that you're trying to give direction to? She said, no. The company doesn't feel that it's appropriate, or they don't have the budget for me to send me to whatever that country is, Ireland. And I said, let me explain something to you. What you have to realize is this. Okay, people in other countries, they already have this preconceived notions about Americans, the Western world. You're snobby, you don't get along with people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she looked at me like, what? I said, yes. Okay, so what you have to do, you have to break that barrier down. And how do you do that? By face-to-face. By face-to-face. Once you have the face-to-face, now you learn the mannerisms, and your natural personality comes out. And so there's a topic that I talk about in the book when I talk about energizing, and it's called transactional analysis in energizing people. And there's I talk about 3 topics. There's the ego state, the parent, adult, and child. And then I talk about life positions, and then I talk about transactions. Well, life positions is that either I'm okay, you're okay. Okay, I'm okay, you're not okay. You're okay, and I'm not okay. Okay, you're okay, and I'm okay. And then you're not okay, and I'm not okay. So based upon those relationships, determines the kind of connection that you can build with that person. Again, based upon those positions, determines the kind of relationship that you can build with that person. Okay, and then so those are, and I won't go. You can read those. I won't take too much of the sizzle out of the book. Okay, but again, so there's those six traits. I talked to you about a couple of them, and then there's discipline. Discipline. You have to have the discipline. Okay. In other words, it's you gotta wanna or you ain't a gonna. Okay, and then the last is execution. Execution. And that's where most digital transformation initiatives fall. Not only digital transformation, but also executing a strategy. If you do your research, look at how many companies execute their strategy successfully. Okay, even more, do your research on how many companies execute their digital transformation strategy successfully. Recently, there was a publication that mentioned that up to 84% of the digital transformation efforts will fail. And there's some questions here that we can talk to that will allude to that.
Yes, absolutely. Being you being in the industry for 35 years, being a sports person who learned agility in football and creating agility in the digital transformation, it's a fabulous experience. But as we see, the different organizations have different levels of agile maturity. What do you recommend to the organizations who are implementing the agile practices, but the maturity levels vary, maybe intermediate, I would say, because everybody wants to go to the best level possible, but many of the implementation difficulties come at the intermediate level. They're able to start, but they are not able to progress as they want because of various reasons.
Here and that's going to be that is the scenario there, and the reason for that is that companies have to look at an organization cannot be what its people are not. Okay, and so when you start looking at maturity, okay, when I look at maturity of an organization, I look at I don't look at the agile maturity. I look at the modernization maturity. Okay, and what I mean by modernization maturity is that the type of organization that the company is determines how adaptable and how responsive they are to change. So, for example, the first level of the maturity is a learning organization. Okay, the next level of maturity would be a performance-driven organization. The next level will be an agile enterprise. And as I mentioned these different levels, the adaptability and the responsiveness increases. So if an agile enterprise, you're not even halfway there yet. Now, the next level is a service-oriented enterprise, service-oriented enterprise. Service-oriented enterprise. So now what happens is now you start looking at your monolithic systems and your processes, and you start breaking those down into services. Okay. When you do that, you increase the adaptability and you increase the responsiveness. Okay, now the next level after becoming a service-oriented enterprise is become a process-oriented enterprise. And then the final level is an innovation-driven enterprise. That's where you get maximum adaptability and maximum responsiveness. And so when we start looking at innovation, understand that innovation is a business process. Okay, it's a business process. In order for it to be effective, it needs to be well modeled. It needs to be communicated. It needs to be understood. It needs to be orchestrated and then institutionalized into the DNA, to the corporate DNA of the organization. And so you ask yourself, okay, who's best equipped within the organization to do that? It's your leaders. It's your strategic leadership and the tactical leadership. And so again, going back to the strategic hustlers are not only strategic, they also understand the importance of tactical and operational. Okay?
Yeah. So when we do that, right, let's say some organizations are at the process level and they feel that the processes are very cumbersome, but their end goal is innovation without knowing that innovation model that they want to adopt. Large organizations, they cannot just turn themselves into an innovation model, right? So they have to do the keep the lights on business at the same time. They also need to go for the innovation. So innovation teams, I get it, they're much more adaptable because of the nature of the work, and they don't have the pressures like the other team members. They're more focused on creating the new things and making the change. So keeping the innovation teams aside for the the normal process oriented ones, if they needed to go to the next level of transformation, keeping just the innovation. So do you recommend that they also go back and revisit their processes and people and invest on that, so that if there is a different way of doing the things and in whatever the KPIs that they are trying to accomplish with? So what do you recommend in that scenario?
Well, first of all, it always starts with the people. An organization cannot be what its people are not. Okay, and so keeping that in mind. Okay, you have to the organization has to determine who what resources, what roles are important to making this transformation. Okay, and then look at the people who are in those roles, and are they equipped? Are they equipped to do the things that are necessary? Are they equipped to educate? Are they equipped to encourage? Are they equipped to empower? And if they're not, which in most organizations that's not the case, that's why you have such an abysmal rate when it comes to digital transformation. And let me just also explain this. Okay, before you can have digital transformation, you have to have business transformation. You have to have organizational transformation. Because what happens is, I remember working on one of the largest bank business transformations in the United States in the past 25 years. It was an international bank. The budget was over $800 million. And so we started off as a business transformation, but what they realized is that it's just a natural progression. If you're putting in new ways of doing things, then that's going to change the operating rhythm of the organization. And so you have to address that organizational component. What happens if you don't? Well, what happens is this here. You could put in an ERP system, and if one of the operators is not trained appropriately to update your inventory, then what happens is you could have a situation where you have someone looking at a screen saying that you're out of stock of a particular item, when in fact that item is sitting on shelf.
Right.
Okay, so again, so you can see where the organizational transformation component is key.
That actually leads to my next question.
Okay.
We have seen the problems in agile transformation being mindset training and people resistance. You brought extremely important points like a business transformation and organization transformation, which does not always go hand in hand, or the sequence of that is somewhat messed up many a times. And IT transformation is going at a different speed and the business transformation. So what do you recommend in that kind of scenario?
I would recommend, first of all, the problem starts with your leadership, and leadership needs to understand the process.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at transformation, there are 8 disciplines that are associated with transformation. Mm-hmm. And so you have those that are the strategic portion, and then you have the enablement portion. And so at the strategic portion, you have your strategy management, you have value management, and you have risk management. And that determines, the type of transformation ambition you're going to have, the direction that you're going to have, setting that direction. And then at the enablement portion, you have to have an organizational project management capability. Okay, if you don't have an organizational project management capability, then your transformation efforts are doomed for failure. Okay. Your project management is the strategic enabler. And so, and then the other disciplines are, again, business process management, IT transformation, organizational transformation. You have to have training and competency management. So those 8 disciplines are very, very key in order to have a successful and an effective transformation. And leadership has to understand that. Leadership it really has to understand that. The effective organizations that I've worked with, and also in terms of the students that I teach, okay, they've all come to a consensus is that leadership they have to be educated. They have to be educated so they can encourage and equip and empower their people. Because what happens now is leadership says, okay, this is what we want to do. Okay, we want to, we want to go into, the digital space. Well, there are different ways in getting to the digital space. Okay, so someone has to define that. Because it's not a technology problem, it's a people problem. And the behaviors that you're going to read about in my book is, I said, okay, what I've done is said, okay, it's enough to say, it's not enough to say a person has to have an adaptable mindset or intelligent mindset. Okay, what else does that mean? Okay, so for example, I'll talk about one of the world-class leadership behaviors, look to challenge the status quo. And okay, what does that mean? Okay, energize people with ever greater challenges. Okay, and so those are what I call benchmarks, because, for example, if I'm sitting and I'm talking to a room full of executives, which I do at Cambridge Corporate University, and a class of 5 to 8 students, those students are from different countries, different regions of the world. And so the challenge is, number one, to agree that look to challenge the status quo is where you need to start at. Now, the challenge to them is determine, how do I implement that in my organization? We all agree that a world-class leadership behavior is look to challenge the status quo. But if I'm in India, if I'm in Kazakhstan, if I'm in Egypt, that means I have to do that differently. So again, that's where being adaptable, being agile comes into play.
Awesome. So I have a couple of more tactical and implementation level questions for you.
Okay.
And with the experience, you can give some, you can throw some light on that. So a lot of times, that organizations, they really talk about agile transformation. They train some people, everybody at the leadership has a theoretical aspects of that. and the team, the boots on the ground, they actually are fully trained. Then they go and they start the Kanbans for supports and sprints for the new build development or platform or project development. They do that. But the leadership, when it comes to that, at the end of certain periodic thing, they are still thinking in the waterfall method. And they wanted to see, hey, you know what? I have a budget of XYZ for that, or I'm expecting this to be decommissioned by this, and I need the next project to be, kicked off on this, or contracts to be written in certain manner, and so on and so forth. The challenges here is how I understand the scale, agile scalability and all those concepts, but there is a disconnect in the operational level versus in the strategic leadership. The question number one, how do we fill those gaps? Second thing is, how do we make the business to be agile? Meaning, like, hey, it's not like we have all or none, we have the smaller chunks. So even the business team need to be more involved in prioritization. They need to be thinking about the big picture and at a regular interval deliveries. And there are so much of chaotic situation that actually happens at the delivery side. So how do we balance these two out? Everybody has got a theoretical knowledge, no doubt about it. But when it comes to the implementation, the speed of two teams is not the same, question one. And the picture the visionaries have and the tactical level team has and the operational level have is different. How do we deal with that kind of most practical scenario?
Okay, that sounds like what I was talking about, the maturity of the organization. Okay, and the first level was learning organization.
Okay.
I was working for an international insurance company, and I was leading the provision and activity for a shared service migration out of the U.S. into 5 different countries. That basically meant that I had 63 projects that I was managing, in addition to other things that were going on in the organization. And so what I did is every 2 weeks, we would have what we call a North American, a management meeting. And I would develop a dashboard. And all of the different areas of different types of projects that I was working on would be on that dashboard. And so you had the CIO, you had the senior CIOs, you had the assistant information CIOs, then you had people from the business side at the executive level. And so what happens is it allowed them to see exactly what was really going on in the organization. So for example, by doing that, this is what it did. Okay. So if for example, we're looking at the downtime, okay, and the system is up, 95% of the time, the system is up, okay, 95% of the time. Okay, and so one of the business executives asked, okay, what happens that other 5%? How much money are we losing? Okay, and so what happens, you start, and that's the key to having that learning organization, because what it means is that whatever you're doing, there's going to be a feedback mechanism. There has to be a feedback mechanism so that your senior management, executive management, leadership can see, okay, this is what the plan is, and this is what's actually going on. And see, that again, that is the key in terms of being a strategic hustler. Okay, again, being intelligent, and then again, understanding those leadership behaviors. Okay, because to think that what you plan is actually going to happen, that is not being intelligent. And so what I suggest is that you have to build some type of feedback mechanism that allows your upper management to really understand exactly how things are going and where they can come in to help. In the book, you're going to read about, I talk about leadership, but then I talk about grip. When you think about gripping, that means you grab something to control it. Okay, and that's why I picked that term. It just so happens that you have to control your goals, you have to control your resources, but a key thing is controlling the interfaces. If you're a senior manager, you don't need to focus your attention on a particular department because that's what you have senior managers like you for. But what you have to focus on is the interfaces. Within every organization, you have the external customer-supplier relationship, but a lot of companies don't realize that that same relationship exists within the organization. And that's the white spaces between the different parts. And so that's what they need to manage. And so, for example, if you're working on a big agile project, and let's suppose you have teams that are geographically dispersed in different countries, how do you, and so now you've got to, you position that you've got to have someone that's responsible for scrum of scrums. That person is key because now that person is that interface. And so the key is being able to take that structure and leverage it so that you can provide the necessary feedback, okay, to leadership so that you can say, hey, boss, you want me to do this? This is what I have. Help me out.
True. And you brought up an extremely important concept of Scrum of Scrums, which is a heart of the Agile transformation and, from the implementation point of view. So I've seen many teams struggling when it comes to Scrum of Scrums, which version, what's the dependencies, and how does that rolls down, how does it boils down to that? Well, that's a good place to churn the milk. So you will have a lot of, it's not going to be a pleasant meeting all the time, but yes, It's going to be a happening place, I would say.
And I'm going to take you back to that word integrity. You'll read in my book that integrity means having the courage to meet the demands of reality.
To read that paragraph. I did read that paragraph.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. And so that's so you'll find that by practicing those behaviors, you will definitely. I mean, I've worked on. I've had some significant failures. And when I look back at those significant failures, it was because there were certain things that I didn't do. I remember I was on an interview and a person asked me and they said, well, in your interview, you said that your success rate in projects was 95%. And so the person said, well, how can that be when the success rate of projects is 65%? I said, the question wasn't that you didn't ask me what the success rate of project was. You asked me what my success rate was. There's a big difference. Okay. And then in my book, you'll learn about what I call the 6 principles of productivity management. And the whole premise behind that is projects don't fail, people do.
Yes, I heard it many times.
Okay.
And one last question, what made you to pen this amazing book of, the transformation? I couldn't go through all the pages. I was reading one page. I was stuck there because it's not just reading. I was studying and, I was trying to process and I was trying to digest. I don't want to read like a newspaper. I wanted to process and learn it. So what prompted you to write this amazing book?
It's amazing because I was sitting in church one day and I was listening to my pastor and I told him, I said, it's your fault that I wrote this book. Okay. Because he talked about how God purifies and parents because your path is predetermined. And when he started talking about that, I said, you know something, I really need to talk about my journey. Really talk about my journey and realize that I've got a very unique perspective. And so I just started writing. I just started writing, and I got with a former mentee of mine, and he said, listen, just write stuff down. And I hadn't even come up with a title yet, and I just started writing. And then all of a sudden, the title started coming. The agile and the words and the leadership, and then with the grip, and then the strategic, and it all just started. It started flowing, and pulling in my. I've got 30 years, of either as a football player and a coach. And so a lot of those lessons, as I was working in these organizations, they're going through team building and all this kind of stuff. I said, I already know that stuff. And so, I just, was able to pull that together, and voila, that's, the book. And then what happened is I knew I was on something good is when I sent the book to a gentleman that was a former, my goddaughter said, well, listen, you ought to create a Facebook page about your book. And so I created a Facebook page, and, and I had over 165,000 followers from over 35 countries. And there was a major following from Egypt. And so I asked myself, well, how do I get a book? How do I get it to Egypt? And so I'm going through LinkedIn, and I seen this guy who's a former presidential candidate for Egypt. And so I reach out to him. And to make a long story short, he asked me to send him a copy. And then he said he was affiliated with a school. And so I sent it to the school, and maybe 2 or 3 months later, they offered me a teaching position. And so I've been teaching there now for going on 9 years. And I've progressed, to the various levels. But the response that I received from, the student, because it's a corporate university, it's not like a traditional university. Okay? All of the students are, they're either business professionals, the executives, the ministers of governments and CEOs. And the things that I was saying, it first of all, it was common sense. Okay. And it also, I think they appreciated the fact that I was giving it to them as a framework, because here I am, I'm in the Western world. Okay. And they're in the Eastern world. Okay. And so it's not to say that my way is correct. It's just a way.
Yeah.
It's just a way. And now you determine how you employ it. And so that's it. I'm finishing up my dissertation, and I'll be coming out soon with the second edition of the book.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Looking forward for it, because I have read some of the content here. I'm being honest, and I haven't completed yet. But there's how you groom yourself as a student and going to the Yale consecutive years, and which shaped up your personality. And then, you attending the football, and then being a coach, and your progressive development, and also talked many a times throughout the book about what is team building and the true leadership is with integrity. And when we talk about the agile leaders, they, not many books talk about this team building and the concept of integrity. They talk about from the IT perspective, like, hey, you have a team, boom, 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 here is the burn down, here is things, what you need to do. That's one way of doing it. But in Agile Transformation, not many times we hear the business transformation. We hear the business transformation and app modernization, but not organization transformation.
Yes.
By doing, a business transformation, organization transformation, of course, your 6-step process of, you talked about service-oriented, agile transformation, performance, and learning, and all those 6 stages of the agile maturity to go into the innovation. They jump from the learning to the innovation.
Yes.
There is a steep, and I have personally witnessed some organizations going to the innovation style, but they didn't have the supporting model to substantiate that adaptability, and there's no predefined processes, and it became a chaotic. So the innovation was put aside, and they came back to a -1 maturity level. So
yep.
I was personally reading these things and correlating the things that are mentioned in the book to my past experience in the industry.
And that's the way you read it. That is exactly when I'm teaching my class, because I only have the students for an hour. And so as I'm talking to them, okay, I'm talking to them and I'm saying, okay, think about your situation. How does this apply? How does this apply? Okay, again, you got business executives and professionals, so they've got a plethora of experience. They're very well accomplished. Okay, and so now it just gives them another avenue to think, something else to put into their toolbox. Okay, I always believe that there's no really right or wrong way of doing it. It's like a case study. Okay, with a case study, it's not about whether it's right or wrong. It's about, number one, you create a hypothesis, and then how well do you support that hypothesis with credible information that you read from the case study. Okay, and so if you do a good job on that, then that supports, because I may have 10 people that look at a case study and they all have different opinions, but if they support them accordingly, then they're right.
Anyways, a lot of insights. Thank you, Dr. Frank, for giving us a quick overview of your book and also the gist of your 3.5 decades of experience. It's my pleasure to interact with you, and I'm sure I'm going at my next step to go through the book again and then start taking the notes from what I learned and spread it.
Okay, then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and have a good afternoon.
All right, then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.